Blog Talk Radio.
What I've left behind, here once again. I'm locked up in memories, they all intertwine. The memories in my mind. I know tomorrow, 'cause that dawn will come. You will never know just what you have done.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to SCAN, which stands for Stop Child Abuse Now. This is SCAN show number 3017, and I'm Annie Margis. The show is brought to you by NAASCA, the National Association of Adult Survivors of Child Abuse. And NAASCA is a nonprofit 501c3. The mission statement of NAASCA states, we have a single purpose at NAASCA, to address issues related to childhood abuse and trauma, including sexual assault, violent or physical abuse, emotional traumas, and neglect. And we do so with only two goals. One, educating the public, especially as related to helping society get over its taboo of discussing childhood sexual abuse, CSA, presenting facts showing child abuse to be a pandemic worldwide problem that affects everyone. 2, offering hope and healing through numerous paths, providing many services to adult survivors of child abuse and information for anyone interested in the many issues involving prevention, intervention, and recovery. Okay, tonight is Tuesday night, and on Tuesday nights we have a question and answer call-in discussion with a survivor professional using an open mic forum. We feature a survivor professional co-host who will field topics brought to the episode by you, the listener. And I'll give the phone number real quick. The phone number to call in and ask questions of our speaker or give ideas for topics. The phone number is 646-595-2118. And tonight the special co-host will be Pastor Deborah who grew up all over the world in a military family where her mother was mentally ill. And she is now a survivor professional living in Pensacola, Florida. She's trained in ministry, mental health, working with substance abuse, and is a trauma-informed social worker, all in one. She volunteers with many community organizations. Pastor Deborah says she can minister by text, phone, Skype, in person, and however the Lord directs her 24/7. She teaches that humans have 3 parts, being a spirit, soul, and the physical body, and believes that all 3 are important and that each area needs care. We look forward to Pastor Deborah being an active member of the NAASCA family for a long time. On these episodes, we welcome various co-hosts, survivor professionals who will assist in fielding questions and lead a variety of topics suggested by our call-in participants. Their trauma-informed perspectives as survivor professionals will help them guide discussions on the issues of child abuse, trauma, and healthy human sexuality that spring from questions and topics brought to us by our listeners. Everyone's invited to engage on tonight's show. And I'll repeat the phone number. It's 646-595-2118. I hope you'll give a call. And I see that Dr. Nancy is on with us. Dr. Nancy, would you like to take over?
Miss Annie. Hi, Miss Annie. Good evening, everyone. So great to be here with you guys tonight. Yes, I just had a chance to hear the bio. Thank you, Annie, for such a great job. And we're so looking forward to hearing more about you, Pastor Deborah. Such a beautiful story here that you have. So may I ask you, so you grew up in a military family? Hi, Pastor Deborah?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Great.
Can you hear me?
And yes, I hear you now. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Your earlier years, growing up in a military family. Did you move? You guys moved a lot, or how was that?
When you grow up in born into a military family, my father was an officer. You lived in certain quarters. You had certain rules. You were detached from most of your other family, aunts, uncles, everything. And you become very close with the people that lived on the base. I was born on a military base, sort of government issue. I never stepped off a military base till, I don't know, maybe 5th grade, 6th grade. And your whole life was on the military base. And you were around soldiers, airplanes, tanks. My father was in the Air Force. So you knew about bombers, you were around airplanes, you had a lot of marching. Since he was an officer, you go to the officers' club, you had certain protocols and social etiquette you had to learn and dress. And it really was a great experience because it helped me not to become involved in local communities or states, but to see a broader picture worldwide. And to develop a lot of character things like being a freedom fighter, willing to give up your life and what everybody else thinks is important, to save and help free other people, to lay your life down if you need to. And all of that came into play later on when I was learning how to help people, because you have to go to school. And at the same time, there was something deeper inside that you recognized some people were free and some people weren't. And you were trained in the military that it's your job, a duty, to go lay your life down, go live in foreign countries, not be a part of most anything that's going on in local communities or states and stuff. And you stayed out of politics. And I was around people from all over the world, every color. It didn't matter. We were all on the same mission, how to help people, to defend people, to be free. That was my early learning about purpose, helping people. You had to learn how to be dignified, educated. When I got my master's degree, I was in school with all Air Force pilots from all over the world, all men. And it was fast-paced, and they were very smart, and they were learning how to be pilots and Secret Service-type people, and they were in uniforms. They were separated from their families, and we went to school together every day for 9 months. So you learned how to, a lot of things about, like I said, helping people. Time as you're a small child, as an officer's daughter, or even as an enlisted person, you don't realize what's developing in you. It's you're getting purpose. You're getting your duty. You're seeing how to conduct yourself, how to talk, how to be a part of a unit. But if you have to go undercover behind enemy lines, you learn how that all of it works together, and you have pecking orders, and you respect that, and you have certain dress codes. all of that, you don't realize when you're living it, that is developing you for later on, say, a bigger purpose. And so that was my early beginnings. You weren't close with your families. You didn't know. You moved every 2 years. I loved it because I got to meet new people. My brother did not like it. He wanted to put roots down. You were always different because when you got to eventually, and you went to school in the community, every military child had to raise their hand. You got a card because we didn't pay property taxes. We lived on base. Your doctors were on base. You went to school on base, and you were around people from all over the world. And you didn't have any prejudice. You while we're on a mission, you were helping people, getting them free, and so that helped develop in me purpose, duty, how you need to conduct yourself in the community when you got there. I didn't know a lot about states and all the different stuff. I probably knew more about countries and nations, and I knew the military we were sent all over the world, and they were well protected, and I knew weapons, and I knew airplanes, and I knew sometimes the man had to go ahead of the family, and you had to be a strong female, because sometimes a husband has to go away on an unaccompanied trip, and you got to raise the kids, take care of business. You can't be wimpy. You can't be poor, woe is me. You got to be tough, and you have to, keep the family together and keep long-distance relationships going. And all of that was building my character so that later on that became more important than a lot of things that most people really care about. Does that help?
Yes, definitely. I mean, that was wonderful. Like you said, you don't realize how all of that together is creating, just helping to build that purpose and that training and that. Mm-hmm. I mean, that was a lot. That was wonderful. Now, other people get that in sports. They have a good coach. They have a team approach. You have your place on the team. You must practice. There's rules. There's conduct rules. You have certain uniforms you have to wear. You have to, stay in good shape, keep your school grades up. Many different areas prepare us as children, young teenagers. We don't see it when we're going through it. And if you've even been sexually abused, people don't realize, it was bad, okay, but you survived. And if you think about a lot of things, I had to study World War II, World War I, all kinds of stuff. Children have been abused since day one, okay, back when Rome, okay. They survive. They don't know how. And some go on and do mighty things. Others, they stay within the system, become saboteurs. They become trying to help other people to survive. But they don't realize that your early experiences, okay, have a great influence on you. And yet some people, bad things happen, okay? They just do. And sexual abuse is just one thing. And, I can't imagine, like, say, living right now over in Ukraine. Daily bombings, living in fear all the time. It's trauma. We got a major hurricane coming into Florida. Trauma, right. Fear, trauma, fear. Right. And you don't realize, okay, that is a form of abuse. Sexual abuse is just one. Right. You can have religious abuse. You can have abuse by, in the military, they have that. Okay, people take advantage. They're your superior officers. They take advantage of you. And so our early childhood, whatever the experiences are, they form us and shape us, and they sometimes we don't know where it's leading, but when you get
now you're an adult and you're connected to NAASCA. You go, oh, I prayed for that to stop, but it didn't. Now I know why it was continued, okay? Why that person didn't. And so those are just some of my early recollections about our early experiences.
So the I think it's so important that you mentioned, even for parents who may be listening now, that, you can help to build a lot of these character, strengths in your children by putting them in sports, putting them in group activities. Like my son, one of my kids, he's into acting. The other one, the music. So there's different ways that they can help to develop some of these structures. But I think it's wonderful that you're sharing your personal one in the area of the military, because some people are thinking about, their kids are thinking about going into the military, and, some families are making the choices to join the military. So, there are good parts of being part of the military family. So I thank you for sharing that. I did want to ask you a little bit about your earlier years with your parents, how that was growing up. I think you said it was your father who was in the Air Force. Was your mother also in the military, or
no, ma'am? How it worked, my father was in World War II. He was like a personnel manager to General Patton. And back then, there was a lot more, they'd call them horrible cultural things. It was the men, who went over to war to die, basically. And they left the women home to care for the children and the grandparents. And then, as we know, eventually the women had to go into the factories, Rosie the Riveter, to work. And if it wasn't for the family, extended family, the grandparents caring for the kids, because there was something back in older generations, the man believed, even we saw it on the Titanic, women and children are to live. I will go down with the ship because there's not enough lifeboats. So men have given their lives. So the female who's married to a military man, possibility they're going to be gone for years. You're going to raise the kids. You're going to take care of the finances. You got his parents, maybe, you're going to have to care for. You may have to go to work. You got to be tough. And in the military, there's no room for wimpiness and poor woe is me and, all of this cultural stuff. You had a job to do. You've got to go into another nation and set entire nations free and give your life if necessary. And everybody knew it. And everybody knew that that's what you were a part of. And they call it the greatest generation. Men had their duty to play, and women had their duty, and the men would go die so the female could live and the children. And nowadays in the military, a lot of people see it as a good job. I can go to school and they'll pay my way. I'll get a GI Bill. And I can learn some trade. And I don't have anything else to do. And, they'll take care of me and I can work my way up in the ranks. And, maybe they'll pay my way to go to college and stuff. And, then some go, maybe I'll be an astronaut, or I'll be in the space, or I'll be in, now it's cybersecurity, that kind of thing. So there's different reasons for going into the military now. And what happens is the military is a family. It's a unit. You support each other, okay? You know what everybody goes through. A lot of funerals, a lot of deaths, a lot of disabled people. But you hang in there together. You're not close to your families. You're not close to the communities. That's your family. You have a system you live in. And when people then retire, or they do their 2 years or 4 years, they get out, they are looking for that. You see that a lot like in sports. You have a sports team. You have your place. You have the coach. You have the owners. You have fine as a unit, but you still have to excel, sort of individually. And when you retire, society's not like that. There's nobody there to coach you and mentor you and get on to you when when you mess up. And so it's difficult for a lot of people to leave a system, okay, and to go out in society and find what they had in the military, we'll say, or the sports or something. It's sort of like a family. But it's not like that out in the community. You go to work, and for the unions, you just go do your job and you go home. If you're in private practice like I was in the mental health community, you're on your own. There's nobody there that really cares if you show up or don't show up, And so when you're trying to help people who've been abused, you have to be a very educated person. You've got to be able to meet with the community, dress appropriately, talk appropriately, do videos appropriately. You got to learn how to give your story. Maybe you got 10 minutes to talk. It takes a long time. Getting up in front of people. And at the same time being aware of people that might be listening, they could get hurt. You could trigger them. But it takes a lot of training, okay, to go from being, we'll say, abused, and learning what your purpose is, what your duty is. A lot of people in World War II, they did some stuff. They don't want to talk about it. They compartmentalize that, and they go on with life. What happened to them, what they saw, you don't want to hear it. And the man is more capable of doing that. He's able to be less emotional than a female. Mm-hmm. Something in them can kill, abuse, hurt, and okay, where the female, she's more of the life-giving type of person because of the womb, and so she has harder times, killing things. So I grew up in a system, and like I said, most people don't realize our early childhood experiences, good or bad. In my family, we had a code. You don't talk about anything, okay? Because you don't do anything that would show any kind of anything, because everything is dependent on the family unit being good. So there's no counseling, there's no private counseling, there's no nothing. You learn not to speed, you can't get drunk, you can't do this, you can't just be crazy, because it would all reflect on the man, and then he might not get promoted because of you. A lot of unwritten codes. So in my family we had issues because my mother had issues, my father had issues. And every person comes into a marriage or a relationship with their family issues. They don't talk about them. We don't, and then we get born into it, and we have no idea. And nobody's talking. And you don't know why. My mother's a chain smoker, and my dad eats candy. You don't know why people act the way as a child. You're just in it and trying to survive it. And I didn't learn much later, about my mother's issues and her unforgiveness and bitterness towards her family. And my dad grew up without a mom. He was Catholic. We had a Catholic and a Protestant married. So as children, you don't know what your parents, or if you have parents, and maybe with your grannies or your auntie, you don't know. But it does affect you. And you don't know what words have been said over you. Maybe the mother didn't really want you, but she had you. Well, she's going to reject you, and that's abuse. Or maybe they wanted a girl and they got a boy. Or they wanted a boy for the firstborn and they got a girl. Or they got twins. Oh, we weren't ready for that. So the parents get overwhelmed. But the babies don't know that. So there's all kinds of abuse besides sexual abuse, but I've had to learn that every person can take whatever happened to them, if they can get with some good coaches and mentors, and they can turn it around. And they can use it to help other people. That I always try to teach people, look, you're on a road, and hopefully you're way on down the road. But there's new people just getting abused, getting on the same road you were on. And they need to see that there's hope through your life. That, yeah, you had bad stuff happen to you, but look what you have made of yourself. Maybe the book you've wrote or a video you've made, or, nowadays if you're not making YouTube shorts on TikTok, social media, if you're not out there, they don't know about you. They don't have money to buy your books. They'll listen to you on a free YouTube or a free social media or maybe a podcast. But then if you get your life or healed, maybe you had to spend a long time in therapy or whatever you had to do to get sort of healing and move on and have your family. There's other people getting abused. They're getting right on the same road you walked. And if they can hear that, yes, I'm down here, keep walking towards this. You'll make it. Okay? Keep walking, keep coming, keep going after healing. So a lot of people don't realize their experiences as children are really to help somebody else. If they will just see and get past, say, telling their stories and get on with getting healed and saying, okay, this happened, it was bad, it happened 40 years ago, but guess what? I got in therapy, I got this, I am not that person anymore. I'm not being abused. I don't know what happened to my abuser. I'm okay. It didn't kill me. It knocked me for a good loop, okay? Brain damage, maybe, so to speak, memory problems, but I'm still here. I'm still shining a light that there's hope and healing. And some new kids, getting abused as a child, they'll become a teenager, and they'll get out on that road, and if they can just hear from you, yeah, bad things happen to me too. Yeah, I know what you went through.
Right. That's awesome. That's wonderful, because people need to have someone that they can get their strength from and they can relate to. I wanted to ask you a little bit about your mom. On the bio, it says your mother was mentally ill. So if you can give us a little overview of that. And the reason why that's very important is because many of us can relate. And I think, people who are going through that, or people who are in their healing journey, hearing about that, how did you overcome? How did you find out that your mom was mentally ill? What was it like living with a parent that is mentally ill? That's very important, because I actually know a lot of people in that situation, but it is hard. It's hard for children. How did you deal with that? And how did you find out your mom was mentally ill? Or did that happen after a situation?
Well, if you're in a family that's got these issues, there's no talking. Code of silence.
Right.
I had to rely on books. Okay? And I didn't know why all the arguments were happening. I didn't know why my mother was so obsessed with certain things, why there was fighting, brother running away from home, mother a chain smoker. I didn't know. Only thing, you did, being in the military, when you were around other people, you put on a good front. But behind the closed doors, there's no talking. And I saw her go through menopause, and it was horrible, and I saw her crying, depressed, obsessed with stuff. I didn't know. I called the suicide line. They can't help. Code of silence. Wow. So all I had to do, probably about 8 o'clock, probably when I was about 8.
Wow.
She's jumping out of cars we're driving, running off. I don't know. My dad is a sweet man, but he don't know. And so I had been a Christian and was probably saved since 3, so I turned to that. I turned to music, quiet, peace in the house, turned to books. I read a lot of medical books, tried to understand behaviors. I read true life stories about Vivian Lee, who went mentally ill, Patty Duke Austin, a lot of the movie stars, okay? And you know, they were, and I would read their biographies. I read Mein Kampf by Hitler. I was trying to find out why people were, what they were thinking. So I went to books. Now this was, what
were some of the behaviors? What were some of the behaviors that you noticed that caused you that help? Yeah. Chain
smoking. I had horrible inside the house allergies. I was sick all the time with strep throat. I was allergic to cigarette smoke. You would get the cold shoulder if you didn't eat what she fixed, because she poured her love into that. She wouldn't outburst. She would leave the spanking to Dad, and he was sort of what you'd call just henpecked. And she just, if she got mad, we got the silent treatment. She took care of her laundry, fixed her own meal. And I'm going, I don't know what's going on. Okay, and you were just shut out. And then she'd go through another stage. We'd be driving a car. She'd get so stressed, she'd jump out of the car. Well, it's moving. I'm going, I don't know what's going on. My dad didn't know. She'd run away from home. She tried to commit suicide. You know, all I could do was watch. Wow. And I remember telling my dad, she needs a psychiatrist. She went one time, I heard, from him. And he said he asked her a question, and that was too personal. That's none of your business. That was the end of that. So, and back in those days... So when you tried to talk to your dad, he would shut you out and tell you to mind your business? He didn't know. By the time, he's just a quiet... He'd worked during the day. He would be gone. Right. He worked at night. You know, he was in the avoidance. My brother there were fights all the time. My brother runs away from home, steals the car, and I have no idea. Nobody's talking. So I didn't know. I'm sure I prayed a lot, but I turned to books. I wanted answers. I turned to autobiographies about people. Like I said, I knew about Patty Duke Austin. She ended up having bipolar. Vivian Lee, who played in Gone with the Wind. I would go to the libraries and get medical books. I wanted to know what, and I would look at pictures and read the books. Books became how I learned. Because this was back in the... Huh?
Did you tell a friend? Did you tell a friend or
no, I didn't have any friends. No.
Did you have siblings?
I had a brother 4 years older. He's running away from... I basically grew up by myself. Grandmother's over in California, and we don't talk to her. No, there's no friends. Yeah. It wasn't, because this was a family issue. But I was seeking answers. I turned to books. I'd go to the library, because we didn't have, social media back then. And, most of the television shows were Ed Sullivan, something like that, or, black and white stuff. So you're not going to get any answers. Back then, this was the 50s, and that kind of thing. You're just not going to get it. So I sought peace, and I would go to the library, and I'd read true stories about people's lives, about movie stars, because I'd see some of the movies, and they would say, they would tell about how they ended their lives or something, and and so that I didn't have friends. When you're in the military, you don't talk to people. You don't talk about any of this stuff. You keep it to yourself. So I did.
That must have been tough. That must have been very difficult to tell.
No, it really.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry. Okay.
Because a lot of times, other people aren't living what you're living. They can't give you what's going on. They're not seeing what you're seeing. They don't hear what you hear. They're on the outside. And it doesn't help. Oh, I'm so sorry. That don't cut it. Okay? That doesn't help me to understand what is happening. Books, true stories, biographies did. because people would write, like Vivian Lee, who did Gone with the Wind, she went mentally ill. And when you start reading about her behaviors and what happened to her, and then you'd look at your mama, and you go, okay. Because I was trying to understand. Now, I was responding, just say, I'd go to my room, didn't try to cause them any problems. And so, sometimes you go through things. You don't need to talk to people. Friends are not living what you're living. And most children need, I got my comfort that I needed, we'll say, from peaceful music, a quiet house when nobody was there, peaceful. And I would take walks outside, okay? And so then it was sort of getting ready we were on edge a lot. So we didn't know how anybody was going to respond. My mother didn't drink alcohol. None of us did drugs. My dad didn't drink. I didn't drink. That you just didn't do that, So I went looking for answers, though. And I knew libraries had them.
Right.
Okay.
I wanted to have Miss Annie. I know she had a comment, and I just wanted to give her an opportunity to come in and join us. Go ahead, Miss Annie.
Thanks, Dr. Nancy. Pastor Deborah, I was just writing down things that were from your story that are also in my story. I'm always amazed by how I hear my story when other people speak. And the things that I heard were your mother was mentally ill, my mother was mentally ill, as was my father. It was lovely. Mm-hmm. And my father was henpecked, like you said your father was. Mm-hmm. My mother would scream all the time. She was a hysterical screamer and abuse him verbally and stuff. And he just took it. And I, too, was sick all the time with strep throat. Mm-hmm. There was one year where I was so sick I couldn't even go to school, and I just kept getting it over and over again. Mm-hmm. And I don't have any specific memories of abuse at that time, but I'm wondering if there was some oral sex abuse going on that may be triggering that. I don't know. It was just a thought. And another thing that we don't know. Yeah, it could be, huh?
Could be.
I take solace in reading. That was how I escaped from all the craziness. Was I read a lot of fiction. That's what I liked.
Well, a lot of people do that. Or, we did that. We had Walt Disney World come on TV, music, and kind of escape out of it. And all of us were able to compartmentalize, that, and my dad in his own way was a big fighter for me, and helping me, and couldn't talk about it because he didn't know anything. Yet he had 2 masters of psychology. So, your family life, their family, what happened to them as children. And later on I learned what happened on my father's side. And later on, as I got older, I understood more about my mother's issues on what was going on. And so I understood, when I got older, their behaviors and that kind of thing. And when my mother died in my living room of liver cancer and Alzheimer's with hallucinations, I forgave her for everything. But what I remembered was she set my feet on the path to God. She took me to church. Everything else, I'm not going to remember that. And so I wanted answers. Still do. When I don't know something, what's going on, why is this happening, okay, I want answers. And so I turned to books. Always have. Now I turn to a lot of YouTube, documentaries, and then God will work through fantasy movies, and He'll show me here. Sometimes He'll show me in nature, or He'll show me true life stories of somebody that's been through it, and I'll read their biographies, and I'll read their stories, and it may not be the same, exactly as mine, but they'll talk about healing and stuff, and that kind of thing. So books and I became, great things, and because friends, they might comfort you, but they're not living with you in it, and they don't have any clue to why your parents or brother or anybody is doing what they're doing. Now, once I got into spirituality as a pastor, I had to start looking at ancestors, word curses, vows made by our ancestors, and how that can come through the generations. And I had to look at unforgiveness and bitterness from my parents as children. My mother's situation, she had 3 other sisters. She was the apple of her dad's eye. Well, he died with a heart attack. She blamed her mother. She was jealous of her sisters. So she left her family early, went to work, and she held bitterness and unforgiveness and hatred towards them all. Okay. And that slowly worked on her throughout the years. And my dad's side was his mother disappeared when he was a child. I don't know if she died or ran away, but being Catholic, you could not remarry. But my grandfather never met him. He had some lady, Betty Smulligan, up in Philadelphia. My dad lived through the Depression. And so he never really, his brother died playing baseball, so we had a lot of death, rejection, disappearance, the Depression. And you have to go back and study the culture and the family of your parents or whoever raised you. You have to understand what they were raised in, what the culture was, their relationship to their parents, their family members. Because when my mother and my father met each other, she was 17 or 18, and he was 28, 10 years apart. They got engaged. He went off to Korea for a year. He actually helped get a lot of the Japanese out, so he had war experience. Came back. They got married. She was 19. She was ready to leave home. Of course, people didn't live as long back then. But we have to understand our parents, the world they lived in, and what did they go through, and what was their education, and what was important to them, and what was their families like. Now, as children, we don't know anything about that. And even if we got some uncle or somebody in our family, you don't talk about that. So there's a lot of not talking going on. And as a child, most of us want to know what's going on. And you try to get answers and nobody talks. And the friend isn't going to tell you because they're not living in it. So like I said, I had to have peace. And the house was peaceful when they weren't there. And if they were there, I would go in, didn't watch television. My mother hated sports and computers, and my dad loved sports, so I'd go in the living room, put on a slow, back then we'd listen to just slow music, nice men or women singing very peaceful songs, and I would lay there and get peace. Then I'd spend time in my room reading books, sitting in a chair by myself, reading books, reading, writing, studying, taking notes. When I could read, right? Trying to understand what is going on. Because I couldn't help. They ain't talking to me. I didn't even get the birds and the bees talk. I got some weird thing by my mom. strange. It was strange. No talking about what you're going to be when you grow up. Or, I was supposed to be an officer's wife. That was it. Okay. Nothing. So I was kind of left alone with two weird people. Brother running away from home, just verbal fights, and I just gone. Okay.
How's your
relationship?
Every time, what? Go ahead, ma'am. What were you going to say?
Every time, my mother was very strict. You ain't going to have long hair and no mustache. And my brother would run out, go to California, and it was the 60s. He'd come in, he looked like a hippie. She'd kick him right out of the house, and that was the end of that. Every Christmas, every Thanksgiving, every holiday was ruined because of issues. I don't like holidays. Hey, I work, I'll make the food, but it ain't nothing to me. I'll celebrate my holidays by myself, quietly. And so the only answers I could get to understand it was from books. And I sought peace for myself, through music. Or I remember laying in a room, and we used to have aluminum Christmas trees and lights going around. I'd just sit there and look at it and listen to peaceful music. While my mother's chain smoking in another room, silent treatment. I used to have to ask my dad, please go and ask her forgiveness. We got to get back to some kind of norm. I know it's not your fault. I was always a peacemaker. I know, right? But
so can I ask you a question?
Sure.
She would wash. What would she wash?
She'd cook her, and when she got mad, she'd cook her own food, wash her own dishes, do her own laundry, not ours. You on your own. Got the silent treatment. Okay. Now so this went on for years, and it got worse and worse and worse, and my dad just got another job and was gone and ate candy a lot and just nothing. So I couldn't figure it out. You don't talk to anybody because when we finally moved off base, I'm in civilian territory. I don't know these people. I don't know much about. We lived in Alabama. I didn't have a Southern accent. I know nothing about the state of Alabama and the Southerners, nothing. So I'm not close to any of them. I ain't grown up there. I've been in the military. Well, there's no friends. And you grew up, you don't talk.
So
a lot of people have been...
I'm sorry. Let me ask you a question. How's your relationship with your brother today? Do you guys talk now?
No, he's dead. They're all gone. He died in 2014. Sorry. And what happened? He was mentally ill. We had him for 6 years. But he got diagnosed as a manic depressive, and he was on medication. And then he got diagnosed as a borderline personality. By this time, I got my license. I'm doing private practice. I know what that means. Because it was never his fault. He still wanted to be a child because there's some family generational curses at work. And how that worked was, on my father's side, back about 4 generations, he's from Northern Ireland. His grandparents came over during the Ireland potato glut. But before that, up in the northern part of Ireland, there were Druids. And there was a lady, she had sex with the Druid high priest. And they wanted the baby to kill it as a sacrifice. This is when I got into being a pastor. And the lady wanted the baby, so she made a deal with the Druid high priest. You can have my 4th grandchild in 4 generations, the firstborn. So deal with me. And guess who that was? My brother. So what happened was, now, I didn't know this at the time, so what happened was these 2 people who had issues had him. And my dad had to go away on unaccompanied tours for like a year at a time. So it was just my mom and my brother. I'm not around. And they got close. And then this strange man would come home and want to be with his wife. Well, my brother felt rejected, abandoned, sacrificed for another. They couldn't kill him because he was he was a Christian, had been baptized. Then my dad would go away again. And they did that. Then I came along. So you have to understand birth order. And Mom has to take care of me. More rejection. So my brother was always wanted Mama and hated his father and me, felt abandoned and rejected. And that just went, and that curse went to work on him. And he was, okay, now I didn't know that when you're younger. You don't know that. And so what happened was he lived with us. We had to kick him out. Too negative. And I said, okay, you're on your medication. You're seeing your psychiatrist. Yeah, okay, that's good. You're doing just what you're supposed to. Yes. Then I go, how come you're still in a special workshop, supervised at work? There's something else. If that medication is supposed to balance out your chemicals in your brain, why do you still need special places to work? And it boggled his mind. He wasn't going to go to therapy. None of their business, because it was not his fault. It was his mama's fault. It was my fault. It was his dad's fault. That was the borderline. He was half a child still, 1 foot in childhood, another foot in teenage, and never wanted to grow up and be an adult. Now, he's dead. They're all gone. All of them, they're all in heaven. I'll see him later. So, you go through it, and most children, believe it or not, we get through the pain, whatever happens, and then the questions start. Why did this happen? Why can't I do? Why are you doing this? And I found a lot of the answers in books. But I had to seek peace, and I found, some people go out and play with dolls and, stuffed animals or something, kind of be by themselves. They need that time. And so when you have born into any family, there's always issues, and trauma is trauma. Sexual abuse is another layer of it, but you could be beaten, yelled at. I've heard parents over the phone yell at their kids, if you don't go get me something, I'll kill you. That's verbal abuse and death to a child. And that is just as devastating to a little child. When they need your attention, you don't want to give it, you give them a cookie. That's abuse. And so I had to learn, I had to study, and I turned to books.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Can I ask you, Pastor Deborah, how did you get to learn about spiritual warfare? Because I'm actually pretty versed in that area. And let me just tell you something. Spiritual warfare is real, okay? It's like God speaks to us, the devil speaks to us. And I always tell people that. Most of all, people that are dealing with, like, suicidal ideations and all of that, I always explain to them, I'm like, no, don't feel bad or feel like you're crazy. This is true. This is part of, just like there's the good, there's the bad. So I'm glad that you brought that up. And I know you touched on it a little bit with your family, with the sacrifice, with your brother. Can you go a little deeper into that, just to bring a light and awareness to this? Because this is very important, and it's really true. Yes,
well, like I said, when we're children, we go through it. Okay, everybody that's with NAASCA has been sexually abused or has some other kind. We're still here, most of us. So we got through it. Now, we might have some issues that need some help. Okay? But a lot of people don't know, they don't want to know why. They just want to be comforted. They hadn't learned how to do that. So what happened with me is I got my master's, plus nationally certified as a clinical mental health counselor and a state of Florida licensed counselor. I was on the American Counseling Association, national committees, lobbying. I was a bigwig in mental health. Study the body, brain, all of that. Well, somewhere along the line, God was calling me to help people still. That's from the military, but not the way of mental health counseling. He wanted me to help people his way. I don't know what that is. So he had to start teaching me. He knew I could read, and he knew I would read. But back in about 1995, a revival came to an Assembly of God church here, Brownsville. power of God poured out, and I'd go get prayer and lay out on the floor for about 2.5 hours. God started reviving my spirit, awakening it. Now I'm saved, pouring into it, and then he'd say, do my work. I'd go, okay, I know what your work is, be a pastor. Do my work. Well, I know what it is. Be an evangelist. Do my work. I didn't even know what it was. Slowly over time, then I got on the prayer team, and I was one that God moved through. Like I'd say, touch him. Down you go. Then I got on their deliverance team. Now, I had never seen demonic spirits manifest in people. Never heard about them. Only mental health. My first one was a lady that started barking like a dog and hissing like a cat, and I go, oh, okay. If the mental health community saw that, they're going to bring out the straitjacket. I was never afraid. I knew what God was teaching me. So I would start doing deliverance, casting out of devils. What's that? Christians can't have them. Well, that's all who we're working on. I worked through the strong man, his name, what's his game, read every occultic book, every deliverance stuff. I studied, I read the prayers, studied Derek Prince, watched videos. I studied. Remember, God knew I'd read. I was reading 6-8 books at one time, going to church, casting out devils, learning how to bind according to Matthew 18, looking at somebody's eyes that were dancing, having to work with 16-year-old children, having to deal with people slithering on the floor like snakes and barking like dogs who said they were intercessors. I was going, the gifts of the Holy Spirit started working in me. I didn't know what they were. I started hearing people think without their mouth moving. I thought I was mentally ill. But I go study Christ Jesus. He said he could perceive his thoughts. I studied other world leaders, and they go, yeah, I'm moving the gifts. I can see the things on paper. I say, okay, I'm not crazy. Okay? I had to know that. And then it was in church 6-7 nights a week, practice. And then God started bringing witches out of the occult, hardcore stuff to me. Because I was crying for them. I have all this on the in the YouTube channel called Spiritual Care, the King's International. I had to go through a trail of tears. I'd cry for months and months because I knew I was saved. I didn't pray. I didn't sing about bless me. But I said, I'm already blessed. You don't have to do any more. I'm going to heaven. But there's people out there in the deepest, darkest spiritual prisons. They'll never make it. And I would cry for them. Couldn't help it. And then I got thrown in with them. And I started seeing them. I had to understand out-of-body experiences, astral projection, occult healings. I had to read true stories, horrible stuff that happened to people. You think just regular sexual child abuse is horrible? You wait till you read how it's done. And people in the occult world and hardcore Satanists. Okay, it is not pretty. I had to read the true stories. I had to watch the movies. It was horrible. But God had to show me their condition. And he had to show me the reality of the enemy. And he had to show me what demons look like. Coming through husband trying to choke me. Looking through their eyes. Sensing them. Seeing animals. And pastors. Now, I didn't talk to anybody. God knew I wasn't going to talk to anybody. Even on the deliverance team, we didn't talk. Some of them weren't seeing what I said. I'd sit right in front of a person. I was casting devils out, and I could see the things moving in their body. Read your stories about beautiful people. Their grandfathers would spiritually come through their window when they were 5, take them at 5 years old to a witches meeting, spiritually. You didn't talk to people. Most Christians didn't believe in this stuff. I studied Catholicism. They do believe. I watched The Exorcism of Emily Rose, The Last Rite, The Exorcist. I studied true stories about this. At least the Catholic Church, they believe you could have a mental imbalance, chemicals off, brain tumor, causing you to have some issues. Well, let's do a thorough medical and a mental evaluation. I used to do neuropsych testing, so I know what head injuries do. So, and if that's not it, and you're still acting weird, we got some enemy there. So But I didn't talk to anybody. You couldn't talk to most Christians about this. So I just studied, made notes, and trusted God to lead me to learn how to help people His way. Now, what He's done is He can use me because I have mental health knowledge, and I teach that, you got a physical body, and there's chemicals and neurons that can get messed up. That needs to be balanced. You got a soul with thoughts and feelings, and that can get messed up. And you got a spirit, and that can get messed up. So all three are important, and all three need to be helped. But in mental health counseling, psychiatry, psychology, social work, you're only going to work with the physical body and the soul. That's all. And they're important.
That's so true.
Okay? But I was called, I can work with that, but that's not how God works. God works with the Spirit, and the Spirit works to transform the souls and bring healing. Now, I used to be another person called Jan. I have a story, it's called It's Time. It's how Jan died. It was horribly. She did some ick, okay? And Pastor Deborah arose. And we all have to have that experience. So when a Christian, say, you had got sexually abused, then you get born again. Keep telling their story, go, honey, you're not that person anymore. You died. See, I'd been through it. Been on the cross. Those aren't your memories anymore. That didn't happen to you. You're a new creature now. You need to quit telling your story. You can say, that happened to the old me, but that old me died. And that's the Christian way. Did you know in Islam, they believe in demonic spirits? They call them jinns. And they have people that cast them out. So if you start studying other religions, they believe. The problem is what happened is most of civilization, I wrote this for NAASCA, an article, up until the time when medical microscopes came in the age of reason, we believed in evil spirits. They used to do something called trepanning. They cut a hole in the top of your brain trying to let those evil things out. And they knew there were evil spirits. But when the age of reasoning came along and science came along in microscopes, you could see the bacteria. All of that went by the wayside and became superstition. And now your problem is a medical, biological problem. It can be addressed through medical therapies. I was a medically trained therapist. My license in Florida was under the Medical Quality Assurance Department. I was under psychology, medical, psychiatry. I could work in hospitals. So mental illness, spirituality, kind of got pushed aside. And
can I ask you a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry. No, I'll let you finish that thought. Right when you're done with that, I'll ask a question. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So, okay. And I was a therapist in a spinal cord injury rehab hospital. And I went to one, and they were Christian, and they asked if I could get a Bible for them and contact the chaplain to make an appointment. I said, no problem. That's my job. Because that was his sense of support. So I went into our staff meeting and told him, and I got my hand slapped. I said, if that is his support system, then my job is to help him and support him through his spinal cord injury. He's never going to walk again. And if he wants a Bible, that wasn't what mental health counseling. They wanted me to diagnose him with them out of the DSM-4. But that is so fluid. You know, homosexuality used to be in the DSM as a psychological disorder. But the criteria for the DSM say you must have some kind of illness, that you cannot be a good citizen, and it keeps you from working and keeps you from, say, having a good family life. Well, the homosexuals at that time came along and said, we're in committed relationships, been with the same person. We work, we make money, computers, people, And we vote. We're good citizens. We're not mentally ill according to your criteria. So they took it out. Gender dysphoria means confusion. Okay? Is confusion about who you are a medical problem? Is it in your soul? Is it a biological problem? But they're trying to get their feelings they're trying to get the body lined up with their feelings. And so I had to study all of this, read quietly, make notes, lots of notes, because I knew God was working with me. I saw some things with 16-year-old kids that would take 6 men to hold down because the anointing was so powerful. I've seen eyes roll back in the head. I've seen people twist and contort their bodies. Okay? I've seen multiple personalities, people moving in and out of other people's bodies.
Yep.
Now, I don't go talk to anybody, okay? Because the church really doesn't believe in it.
Well,
or some pastors don't. Go ahead.
No, well, what I was going to say was one of the things that I noticed is everything's being blamed on mental illness, mental health, mental illness, but there are people who are actually possessed and they're fighting spiritual warfare. Me, if I'm not properly covered, I won't sit there and bind and fight because I know how to fight in the spirit, but I will not do it if I'm not properly covered. Especially, because those spirits try to jump in your body to you and your children and your family, and so So I definitely, like I said, I believe in it. I fight in it, but I will not fight if I'm not properly covered. So I'm glad that you're covered as a pastor to be able to go
I only have one covering over me, God. That's it. I'm a non-denominational. I don't have a church. That's it. Okay?
Well,
I have no other.
Did you become a pastor?
I started to become an Assembly of God pastor. Almost got fully ordained. But because I was working with Satanism, witches, people with spirits, the assemblies didn't believe in it. And it was scary because the enemy was coming. And they didn't want to touch it, so we decided I don't fit in your square. So God said, you just come out, I'm your covering, that's it. I don't have a church building, I don't take tithes. God anointed me to help people his way. Sometimes it's just in prayer. Sometimes now it's on videos teaching. But I had to understand mental illness and mental health. And they do good things. They're trying to reach the person's feelings and their. I used to volunteer in a crisis stabilization unit, and this one young guy, he was so sweet. I was telling him, I do this, and he says, well, I think I'm under spiritual attack. I said, why? He said, well, my parents believe in voodoo. That's in the black community. And ancestors. And he says, I don't want to worship that, and I think I'm under spiritual attack. I said, you probably are. I had to study voodoo. I had to study ancestors. Okay? And I had to learn how to go back 10,000 generations. For years, God threw me in the deep end of the swimming pool, is what he did, with the hardest of the hardcore stuff. I see him. I had to study what's behind everything going on, the weather, what's happening. I said, God, who's behind this? It's either you or the other guy. But I didn't go around talking to people about it. And I can work with mental health counselors. They do a great job. Social workers do. Anybody that's trying to heal is trying to do a good thing. And so people who have been abused, there's nothing wrong with going to a mental health therapist. They do a lot of good work. And if you got to be on medication for a while because your biological body's messed up, the neurons, the chemicals are not balanced, you're not eating right, you need that help. Because God cares about the physical body and the soul and its thoughts. And then he's trying to reach the spirit part, which is a little harder. Unless you really got anointing, you're just talking to the soul. So I didn't talk to anybody. I was raised up, from my early childhood. Study. Go get a book. Ask me questions. Go look. I'll help you find the answers. Keep your mouth shut. I didn't talk to people. Even though I had friends, they were Catholic, whatever, Baptist, I didn't talk to them because they wouldn't. Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Right. Let me ask you a quick question. So for someone who's been called, because I hear a lot of people talk about that, a lot of people are called and they don't feel that they're covering. Everybody's called. Yep, okay. Everybody has a different calling. Everybody's called to something. You're right. You're right about that. But, sometimes if you don't have the support from a ministry, from a church, from a church community, if they're like, they don't believe in your gifts that God has spoken to you personally about, a lot of people go on and just keep moving, and they go on and find a way to still be covered or ordained. So what would you say to someone who's called to be a pastor, but maybe the church doesn't believe or doesn't support, and they won't graduate you, or they won't ordain you, or they won't cover you? Instead of that person that's waiting for years for the church to accept them.
Okay. First thing I was under pastors all during the revival my whole life, okay? And you cannot leave a church, a denomination, a pastor, anything, till God removes you. And he'll do it slowly. He moved me first from my pew, and then he'd say, I want you to go over to this church because there's a testimony going on, or I want you to go hear this person's preaching. And then you go back, and I have a story called the pew story. We get so set and stuck and bonded to a pew or church, friends, and people go, yeah, but they're my friend. Honey, you ain't. Once you get it in your brain, you are called by God to work, duty above friends. That's where most of your pastors get messed up. Do they serve God first or their family? Do they serve God or the church? Or do they serve the church, then God, then your family? Growing up in the military, you serve the duty. You're here to get trained, to go set people free. Taken over, invaded. That's your whole life. That's your whole job. Now, in that purpose, you got to be disciplined. You have covering. I was set under pastors until I was released. For some people, some church, no, the assemblies did not believe you could be an apostle. That's a sent one, so you ain't going anywhere. They were too afraid of dealing with the occult, so they're not going to have it. They do have female pastors. Some Baptist churches, if you're a female, you're called, you have to go to another church and get under a pastor, and you stay under it, okay, until God releases you. Sometimes he needs you to be there just praying for the pastor and the people, quietly. And you're learning things on the side through books or videos, and you're doing spiritual warfare prayers, but you're called to that church because that church is in bondage, that pastor's in bondage. Maybe you're just called to sit there and do nothing but pray. Other people are called, and they have to get mentored. And some pastors, there's a lot of pastors. I got out, you type in deliverance ministries, you'll see them all over the place. Some of them are very good. Some of them are very loud. Some of them are on YouTube now and stuff. But I stayed. I didn't want to leave my pew or the church. But God has to, it's sort of like you're in boot camp. I use the military. You're an officer candidate school, and you stay in that until God says you graduate. Now go do your first duty. Where's all my friends? Well, they're all scattered everywhere else. Okay, nobody gets to go with their buddies. And then if you watch World War II movies, we went through Annapolis together. Yeah, but he just died on the Arizona. But we got to kick some butt. And you will die to do it. I've been almost stabbed in my own home. Shot at. Had husband, okay. It doesn't stop me. Poisoned. Because what happens is once you get that anointing and God's with you, you'll be tested. And I'd love to have you call me sometime and we can talk more about it. You'll be tested and tested. See, you got the real thing? You can say all you want to, but we're going to look at your spirit. We're going to see when you bind, what happens. And if you got the goods, they're coming after you. They'll come through your family, job. They'll come through animals. They'll use the weather. Okay? But you have to be dedicated. Oh, okay, so I'm over here in enemy territory in the church. Yeah. Maybe all those people in that church are spiritual prisoners and they don't know it. God works in dreams.
Oh,
you
yeah.
pray, okay, but you don't do the work, and not until He can trust you. It's the same way. There's a lot of mental health therapists. They don't do any good work. They got issues of their own. I've seen people, marriage counselors, and they've been divorced 3 times. You're going to teach somebody how to do marriage counseling? Okay. Don't work that way. I mean, you might get a few patients, but you ain't going to make any money. There's no anointing on what you do. And so I've had to learn how to combine. I don't do the mental health counseling, but I can. I can talk to the soul. And I do a lot of videos about, we need to change your ideas, your concepts. What are you thinking about? What's coming out of your mouth? It's your words, it's your concepts, your ideas, your beliefs in your soul. Well, where'd that get formed? Out in the world, through families, culture. Yeah, but what about your spirit? So, because when people die, they're leaving their soul and their body behind. So I had to learn how to work in all 3 areas. I didn't plan this. I was moving as fast as I could, reading 6 to 8 books. I would have the books in my car, and when I'd stop at a red light, I read. Watching videos, making notes. God was in a hurry to help people. And a lot of people that have that calling to help people, okay, they want to help. And NAASCA is supposed to give everybody a place where they can tell their story, okay, and then become an advocate, But to be a proper advocate, you must have public speaking knowledge, how to make videos, how to be on YouTube, how to go out to the community and have a table and do handouts and be a talker and hug people correctly. And there's all kinds of hugs. You know, I could sexually abuse anybody just holding hands in a women's jail. Advocates need to go into jails. I can rub holding hands in a prayer circle and sexually abuse you with my hands. I can look you up one side, down the other, because there's spiritual things at work. I've done jail ministry. I have gone into the hard parts of the jail. I've been in the hospitals. I've been in crisis stabilization units. I've been trained in chaplaincy in a hospital, in the emergency room when they're dying and stuff. And every pastor needs all of that. And so I just talk from experience. I volunteered to be a guardian ad litem, the eyes and ears for the judge with abused children. Need to know the system. And so when people come to NAASCA, they need to hear the stories.
They do.
But but one time is enough. And if it goes on and somebody's listening and go, well, that's great. You just triggered me, but you gave me no hope. How do I get healed? Where do I go? How does your story that isn't, and you're still just in your pain, how does that heal me? I don't ever ask anybody any questions. I figure everybody that God brings to me, one way or the other, they got issues, and they need healing. You don't have to tell me your story. I've already read your story in a book. I've already read all the details about sexual abuse every way, anything. I've read it, I've seen it, I've watched it. You don't have to tell me anything. My job is to get healing to you. That's my job, my duty, set you free, story and the trauma, so you can have blood. I just did some deliverance work with a young guy. And he said, I can now love my family again. And I did deliverance with a young girl. She's half black and half white. She had stuff from Africa that was keeping her in bondage. She didn't know anything about it. But I did, because I'd studied. And so I have to study. And it's like when you go to a doctor, I don't know what time it is there. When you go to a doctor, you want him studied up. You want him to look in your eyes, and he knows everything. He'll listen to your heart and stuff, look at your blood work and things. You want him knowledgeable so he can take, okay? And we feel safe. We feel secure in his hands because he's a learned person. Friends are not learned. Most advocates are not learned. They can't trust you. They can't come to you in the spirit. They don't believe your words because you're still in the mess and you're just dragging them down. And so hopefully through these shows, people will see that NAASCA is a place for people to tell their story, but then to be trained, mentored, and brought up under tutelage, so to speak, to be an advocate. They need training on how to talk on the radio, tell their story, how to do a social media video, be interviewed on a Zoom, what to wear, how to dress. But the main part is, yes, this bad thing happened to me, but I got healed. It may have taken 30 years. It may have been through mental health, other ways, but I can tell you, what was meant for evil turned out for good. Now I can help other people who are still getting abused, children. I'm here. And they thought they were going to take me out, and I was going to stay a victim and just wanting people to hear my story and comfort me. I don't tolerate that.
Right.
I don't tolerate that at all. Get up and do something. Quit whining. There's people, I knew people were dependent on me, learning how to help them. And if I didn't, they would die and go to hell. And I would tell every person I helped, you better listen to me. There are little children that are, these might be 30-year-old people. They're just now starting what you had 30 years ago. Right. And they're dependent on you getting saved and going after God to help them. So I had pressure, and I had to stay in that kind of mentality. Or mental health counselors, it's business. I'll see you in a couple of weeks or a month. And if you have an emergency, go to the hospital. And then you spend 50 minutes sob storying, and they might do hypnosis and other stuff. And can it work? Sure. But I was a big one. Okay, yeah, it's getting close. 5 minutes.
No, it's okay.
Go ahead.
We have 4 minutes, but I wanted to ask you if you can leave a word for the listeners about forgiveness, the power of forgiveness, why forgiveness is important, and how to get there. We have 3.5 minutes, please.
Okay. When you learn that something bad has happened to you from other people, you set yourself free. You have to forgive them. I think everybody knows that. The problem is you don't have the forgiveness and the power of the forgiveness that you need. It comes through, as a pastor, Christ Jesus. You say, I need your forgiveness that you gave to me on the cross. That's the most powerful one. I don't have it in myself. I ain't got enough of that stuff. I don't want to forgive them. But you did, and you want me to. So hand me your forgiveness so I can pass it through me to them. And it's hard to do that. But you're going to see that person, and what happened if I save them on their deathbed in the spirit? They'll be in heaven. They'll be a baby, and they'll never know. They'll never had any sexual abuse, never had done anything. Brand new and clean. And you're down here still trapped in your unforgiveness and bitterness, hatred, and wanting them to go to jail and stuff. You're only hurt. They say it's your own poison, and that's where the enemy wants you to stay. Because you're no good to anybody. And you'll pass that on, believe it or not, spiritually to other people. And so forgiveness is vital. It's from my point of view, it starts in the spirit, comes through the soul. The spirit learns it's been forgiven itself by God, extends that out to the soul and say, now you forgive through you. You're just my helpmate. You ain't going to stop this forgiveness. This forgiveness is coming from my spirit. It's not coming from you, soul. You're going to pass this spiritual, godly forgiveness through you, your mouth, to somebody else. But what happens is the soul wants to stop it and control it and not let it come through. So, does that help? It's hard it's hard when you're dealing with people who've been abused. Most of the time, they're children. They disassociate, have multiple personalities. And I'm dealing with a family in there. I'm dealing with many. I'm dealing with dark side parts, light side parts. I'm dealing with other people that are in them, that are talking through them. I'm dealing with multiple people. I'm dealing with a part. There's some that don't ever want to forgive. They ain't never going to forgive. And then there's a part in them that wants to forgive. Now, how do you deal with that? That wasn't taught in mental health counseling, and it's not taught at the master's level, maybe at the psychology level, but it's definitely not taught in churches and religion. But I had to learn how to go to the core, to the little one.
Right.
And
like you said,
know,
personalities. No, I'm sorry. Just like you said, there's multiple personalities. A lot of that is to help us survive. It's a survival mechanism, protective mechanism, and so it's just one is strong.
No. When you use the word defense mechanism, that's mental health talking. Mm-hmm. It's a gift. I asked God, how come people form personalities? He said, because I'm a multiple personality. Sometimes I'm a judge, sometimes I'm a lawgiver, sometimes I'm a father, sometimes I'm this, sometimes I am multiple. Wow. I am that I am whatever I need to be at the time. I gave that gift to you. But then you say defense mechanism. It is God's way of protecting the spirit. He'll put him in a trance if he has to, hoping somebody will come along soon. Okay? So sexual abusers, they don't get much of this training in the church. The church pastors, there's nothing in their church.
The Blog Talk radio show ended before I could finish my statement that in the church, not much spiritual warfare is taught and how to heal people from childhood sexual abuse. But Pastor Deborah's learned, that's me, how to help you the Lord's way. So I want to encourage you to seek out and find healing for your abuse. There is hope for you, and find the forgiveness that you need for yourself by forgiving not only yourself, but others. Reach out to anyone at NAASCA. Look at the website. Listen to the radio blog talk show. There's hope for you, no matter what happened to you in your childhood, your teenage years, or what your parents had or didn't have. You be encouraged. There is hope and healing, always ready and waiting for you. You just have to want it. I'll see you next month on another Blog Talk radio show with NAASCA. Bye. This is Pastor Deborah. Agape Love. Love is Here's global spiritual teaching ministry. You can find me on YouTube on the Hidden Kingdoms channel, on Rumble at Agape Love's War, and soon coming YouTube Shorts. Yes, you can also find it on the website of www.agapeloveishere.org. There's a lot of help for you, both in the mental health world and the spiritual world. Reach out. There are people that love you and will help you. See you next month. Bye-bye. This is Pastor Deborah.